Cool. So I'm Julia Walsh from Brand Medicine International, and I'm really excited to be hosting this webinar today on the questions that Australians are asking about the coronavirus vaccine. Today is a significant day because we've just had the breaking news that the AstraZeneca vaccine has been approved here as well. And what I've been able to see over the last few days definitely is some shifts in the kind of questions that people are asking. So I'm just going to share this presentation to give you just a quick snapshot of what search listening actually is before we dive in and actually undertake it, because I think that will help to inform people about that. The other people are just jumping in 10 minutes. Cool. So I share this screen. So search listening is basically a great tool that we can use as an industry to really understand the questions that people are asking around any category. And I think it's so relevant in health. And if you want to join a conversation about this online, and especially if people are watching the repeat of this, use hashtag search listening health and connect with us at Medicine Brand on Twitter as well, and feel free to have the conversation there. There's about 6 billion searches undertaken in search engines every day, and 1 billion of them are estimated to be health related. And every single day we're seeing 10 to 15% of the long form search queries that are entered into search engines be brand new questions that we've never seen before. And so that's one of the ways that this represents an enormous database of human intentions, of human curiosity, of the burning questions that we want to know. It's also very representative because everybody turns to search engines. It's unlike social listening in one particular bucket or platform. You're able to really get a very representative sample of the knowledge that people are seeking. And the other advantage of it is that people turn to Google to ask questions that they might be embarrassed to ask in other forums. And it's immediate as well. So it represents a really great tool for people, obviously, to use to find information. But the trails they leave in terms of the questions that they ask and the trends we see with those questions are so informative to us in pharma. And that's why I was inspired to host this webinar today after a bit of a preliminary exploration with someone the other day that were like, wow, we should actually be sharing this with industry because it's very cool what we're discovering. So search listening sits apart from the traditional methodologies that we use to harvest insights about the patients and categories that we work in. Social listening is often used, but it is a great way to kind of understand what people are saying about your brand when you're not in the room. It doesn't necessarily reveal what they want to know about the brand in the same way that search listening does. It's a great way, of course, as well to track the efficacy of campaigns. Keyword tracking is different in that it doesn't provide the context that search listening does. And search listening also lets you follow the patient down the rabbit hole and see the results that are coming back in answer to those questions. And that is what I believe is so critical for us in industry, is understanding the information that they're being exposed to. And of course, surveys and focus groups are something we've used for a long time to understand the patient mindset, the patient journey, and of course our healthcare customers. But there's that sense of censorship in that as well, the group dynamics, the fact that people have been recorded, they kind of can be very, very careful about that, and you don't always get everything you want to know. And of course, we live our best life on social media, so that's why scraping that for insights is not going to necessarily reveal as much as you might from a healthcare context, because we don't always share what's going on with our personal lives on social media from a healthcare point of view. But we live our real life on Google, and we do turn to that in moments of need. And in this particular situation, my son was undergoing an 1.5-hour long MRI, and I sat outside that room in the radiologist's office, Googling information on my phone about prognosis, the best doctors, what does this mean, all kinds of questions until pretty much my battery went flat. Now, my parents didn't even know that I was there, but Google did. And I think this is a really great example of why search listening offers us an opportunity to join patients right from the very beginning of their patient journey. And so that's where search listening comes in. They definitely ask about the prescription therapies that we are, are having prescribed in Australia all the time. So while we are not yet enabled as an industry to serve back content to patients online, branded content about prescription therapies, there's definitely a need, because in a survey that I recently undertook, over 80% of the people who participated said that they turn to Google or whatever search engine they're using to look up a treatment when they've been prescribed it. And so the information that they find there, if we're not able to provide patient responsive content, can mean that it can deter them and send them on all kinds of wild detours, such as, some blogger who reckoned their cancer was treated by dog medication, or, they can definitely kind of end up on all sorts of detours, particularly from reviews, which can be a big driver of primary non-adherence. So they get that prescription, they go home, and they never open the box because they are so deterred by this blogger who wrote a story about their experience N of 1 that seems to have eclipsed the power of the meta-analysis of efficacy and safety on that particular product. But of course, as we examine the questions, we definitely need to understand the answers that are being served back to people. And so that's where I've sort of coined the term patient information experience, or PICS. And that's something that we'll be exploring today as well, in terms of what kind of content is being served back to some of the questions that we might detect. So let's get to the heart of this webinar. What do Australians want to know about the COVID vaccination program? This is just one very quick snapshot that I've pulled from the databases that I use. And just to give you an idea as well, the way the questions are designed, in the way they're served back, is that the questions that are more frequently asked across a particular branch of this tree will be represented by the darker green circles, and the gradient will reduce based on the frequency of particular questions that are being asked. So you'll kind of see that. But then we also, what we use is like a seed term when we put that into the database. We don't put in a whole sentence, because what we want to know is what whole sentences, what whole questions are people actually asking around that seed term. So we'll pop the word in, and then it will generate a report that captures all of the questions being asked by Australians today around the coronavirus vaccine, or around the vaccine, or around the Pfizer vaccine, and things like that. So we can go in and we can look at it from different ways. I thought it was interesting that one of the very commonly asked questions is, are vaccine companies liable for damages? So this is something that's very prominent in the questions that are being asked. People are asking, are the trials safe? I thought this was really interesting as well. Are the vaccine symptoms contagious? Just incredible, the kind of things people ask. And, I love that people are so engaged in this topic, that people with I guess a relatively low health literacy, I'm sure they're really fabulous and brilliant at whatever it is that they do in their day jobs, but unlike people who work in the healthcare industry, they don't understand the full mechanics around the vaccine. And so this is a question that's been asked. Are vaccine passports legal? I thought that was an interesting one too. People are curious to know whether or not they're going to be forced to have a passport that confirms that they've been vaccinated before they're allowed to travel, whether that's interstate or even overseas. And they're wondering, is there a legal precedent to this, or am I, is there a way that I can just travel without that? Are the vaccine side effects good? And, the sustainability equation comes in here too. Are vaccine vials recyclable? I thought that was an interesting one, because people do care. They really care about the environment now. That is becoming more and more prominent, and it's coming across into all aspects of business. And it's interesting to see that question pop up. Are vaccine volunteers paid? So I guess they're wondering, there's a lot of people out of work at the moment. There's job keepers going to be cut altogether, job seekers going to be pared back. People are looking for ways to make money. They're like, maybe if I volunteer for the vaccine trial, and they're trying to figure out if they'll be paid for that. And then what we'll do, it's where it gets really interesting, is we'll be following what search results do they get. So, for example, this question about, are vaccine symptoms contagious? We can see that people have not really had their question answered, I don't think. And this just means that no one's thought of that question. No one's thought that people are going to be asking that question. So no one's created content to respond to it. So those patients are not patients, I guess, they're just people. And that's why this is such an interesting exercise, because often when I'm doing a search listening exercise, I'm looking at people with a particular disease or who have been prescribed a particular therapy. But in this instance, it's everybody, and they're not really getting that, because I think they're talking about, are you contagious if you have side effects? You're not contagious from the vaccines. That's a bit of a good answer, but it's Cleveland, it's overseas data as well. So, New South Wales Health or some of the other health authorities that are publishing amazing content on the coronavirus, this could just be stuff that they add to their content to build that, make it really robust. So let's start exploring. I'm going to do a search around vaccine, because at the moment, there's so much noise about the coronavirus vaccine online that obviously before coronavirus, if you searched vaccine, you'd get much broader search terms coming back, because people are asking about all different kinds of vaccines, and it was the regular kind of background noise around the category. At the moment, if you search for vaccine, it's very prominent because it's so current and topical that pretty much most of the questions, bar like one or two, are related to the coronavirus vaccine itself. And then we can examine the different vaccines that are available and are being manufactured, and do a bit of an exploration there. Definitely feel free to pop specific questions into the chat, like if I've missed one or there's one that you're really curious about. Now, I am not a coronavirus vaccine category like expert. I've worked in healthcare a long time, but I'm not working day to day in the vaccine category. So feel free if there's something you want to clarify. My understanding is that CSL is making the AstraZeneca vaccine in Australia. So maybe there's kind of some links there, some questions that will pop up. And then on the weekend, there was some really interesting news. Well, it wasn't news. It was reported in the news about some of the vaccines being derived from aborted fetuses, and I expected that would then lead to some questions to come up, and I did start to see some questions in that area. So that was interesting to kind of track as well. And people are looking for the COVID vaccine from a fetus, and that might mean that they want to make sure that they don't get that one. What's interesting about these queries is to see and follow through where these people have been taken, because I feel like overall we want the maximum public health response to this effort. We need as many people to be vaccinated as possible. So where this hangs in the balance, and what's really important, is the swings and roundabouts where people could follow a search query like this and through and get information that absolutely 100% deters them from wanting to take the vaccine that's available in that area. And so what we need to do as an industry is make sure that there's balanced patient responsive content available when they ask these questions, that gives them context, that reassures them that some of the churches have come out and said that they absolutely endorse that it's okay for their members to take vaccines that have been derived from these. So we want to make sure that that kind of content is being served up in response to the questions that have been asked. I love this fetal bovine serum. Oh, okay, yeah, I guess that's pretty sophisticated. Another thing as well that I look at with the questions in terms of segmentation is, younger people are more comfortable and more commonly using voice-activated search. So the conversational style of question that's more of a full sentence can often indicate that's a younger segment of people. And then when there's really like complex medical terms being used, I would anticipate that that is probably a healthcare professional asking that question, or a segment of healthcare professionals. So that's something as well that I use as an indicative guide of, who might be behind the questions. Obviously, we don't know for real who it is. So I'm just going to toggle out of this across to the database. And we could start with the vaccine as just a general one. Just moving this out of the way. Cool. So it does require a bit of leaning in. Can you see that? I'm just looking at one of the questions. Can everybody read this? I'm hoping that you can. So basically, this is the wheel that comes back, and it links the type of questions that people are asking about that topic. So I put vaccine in as the seed term, and we can see here, like, which vaccine is Australia getting? And if there's any that you particularly want me to follow through to see what the answers are, just give a shout out. Can vaccine companies be sued, for example? Like, that's one that we can kind of follow through. And there's vaccine injury compensation programs. There's all kind of liability for the production and sale of vaccines. So maybe that's guidance for companies. And then here's a pretty clear: you can't sue Pfizer or Moderna over side effects. One of the interesting side effects that I found people asking about today with respect to the Moderna vaccine specifically is that apparently they said Moderna vaccine Botox side effects. And actually they didn't mean Botox at all, they meant fillers, but apparently there is some association between hyaluronic acid fillers, I guess, and the Moderna vaccine. So it is kind of interesting to see that. There's this question around, are vaccine symptoms contagious? Are vaccine passports legal? People want to know how they work. And I think that's because we're launching really brand new types of vaccines into the market. And so people are very curious. Will the vaccine end COVID? So there's a lot of hope there around that this is going to finally, people are desperate for this all to be over. And definitely as we enter the second year, it just feels like it's dragging out. I also see what's interesting is I know there's a lot of Australians trying to get home from overseas. And so sometimes you'll see questions asked in Australia that could be by family members for people overseas. So like, where can you get the vaccine in New York City or in Florida or in New Jersey? People want to know where the vaccine is made. So if there's anything here that you want me to follow through, we can definitely do that. So this is sort of another way where it links with prepositions. So vaccine with nanotechnology, people are curious, like, what is the nanotechnology? There's all kinds of theories out there. I'm not sure if this is where it kind of starts to go down the QAnon paranoia kind of track as well, that you want to make sure that there's no information that's reaffirming people's Pete Evans style associations. They're wondering if you can still spread the coronavirus if you're vaccinated, and obviously that does matter with respect to the quarantine workers, because it's one thing to be vaccinated, but if they go home and they've still got the particles all over themselves, they can still transmit that to their family members. Another thing that search listing is really great for is to inspire product development, because you can start to see the qualities of a product that people really want and that they're searching for. And it was great to see on LinkedIn yesterday, I believe, a post about some companies that are really starting to manufacture vaccines that can be delivered without a needle. And people are definitely looking for a vaccine without a needle. This is an interesting one as well. Vaccine is kryptonite for the US dollar. So I followed this one earlier today as well. And there's a lot of conversation. So you see the influence of the financial markets here as well. And there's a lot of conversation around the financial implications of this, and that they feel that the US dollar is going to weaken in response to it, and how the RBA is linking to that. And it's funny to see the search term actually uses maybe a headline style that people have seen it and now they're looking for that. So they're actually saying is kryptonite for the US dollar rather than will impact the US dollar. So I thought that was an interesting kind of search on that particular topic. So let's just go down there. People are wondering if there was a vaccine for the Spanish flu. So someone's asked here if people are showing a preference for the Pfizer vaccine over the AstraZeneca vaccine. Yes, so we can actually go into one of the things that, and this is the wheel here, we're just obviously in general vaccine, but I can go into it as well in a moment, where you can aggregate the comparative searches that people are doing. So this versus that. So you can kind of see there. People are actually, in this instance, more generally related to vaccines. They're looking at vaccine versus immunization. They're trying to understand, is that the same thing? Vaccine versus gene therapy, vaccine like a hangover. Vaccine versus antibodies. They're trying to understand, like I saw before as well, like your natural immunization, like if you get COVID and you've got those natural antibodies, is that more potent than one of the vaccines? So it is kind of interesting. And the other thing that a search report will break out is the alphabetical breakdown of that search term. So you can start to see all of the different alphabetical associations. So people are searching for vaccine AstraZeneca, vaccine batch number search Australia, which is kind of interesting. And feel free if there's anything here that you want to kind of look at. Vaccine herd immunity. People are probably wondering why, how many people need to be vaccinated before we achieve that herd immunity. So let's go back and let's jump into Pfizer vaccine specifically and see if there is that comparison to the AstraZeneca vaccine, and then see what kind of search results are coming up. So I looked up Pete Evans before too, because I was interested to see if there was anything related to coronavirus and him, and some of the misinformation is generated by some of these people, and I was just interested to see if people are actually searching for it, but the good news was that they weren't, so that was good. So let's go into Pfizer vaccine. I'll jump straight down to the verses and then I can come back up. So Pfizer vaccine versus Chinese vaccine, Pfizer vaccine versus Moderna versus AstraZeneca. So people are actually asking that. They want to compare and contrast the three. One of the things that people are really looking for that I picked up earlier as well is like a comparison table. So they're like vaccine efficacy chart or vaccine comparison table. So people really want to see all of the different vaccines side by side. And so that could definitely be something that someone could publish, and they would get a lot of traffic to their website that way. So here's an article from prevention.com that's coming up at the top. So it's interesting that the search results are not going to a Pfizer or an AstraZeneca or a Moderna site. Wikipedia actually often comes up in the Bing searches. So that's where, in this white space here, this is where you could buy a Google ad and you could place an ad to direct traffic to a website that when someone's asked that question, that you can then follow through and stay connected with that prospect. But yeah, Bing often has Wikipedia in this space as well. So it just shows that it's really important to know what Wikipedia is publishing about your vaccine, because you know, a lot of people are going there. And then, of course, with search listening, how long is a piece of string? You can keep following these queries down the rabbit hole, and you can really kind of see. So it's interesting. They're here talking about the AstraZeneca vaccine, that it's cheaper, easier to distribute, and relies on different tech than its competitors. So that's where that came through. Just pop back here. What's the reference to a hangover about? I think that could be to do with a lot of people are talking about the effects of the vaccine, and that's one of the things that I think is an important part of the social media narrative to address, because one person can put off other people by talking about, I'll just actually come back here. One person can put off other people by talking about that, you know, that effect. And one of the things I've been doing when I am on social media is just going, oh, well, that's great. That's the vaccine working. Like, that's your immune system ramping up and responding and developing that immune response. So that actually means the vaccine's working. Like, you know, nothing comes easy. And like, our bodies actually have a job to do in response to these the vaccination. So, you know, it's important that people kind of understand that, and that there's not really bad noise out there about the hangover effect and, you know, not feeling great after you have the vaccine. Obviously, all in balance. If someone's having an adverse event, then that needs to be addressed, but doesn't need to be addressed in the public space necessarily. So I'll just share that screen again, and we can kind of go back into the Pfizer vaccine in a bit more detail from the beginning. Look at how many questions there are around this particular topic. Like, it's absolutely massive. Everyone's on the edge of their seats in terms of when is the Pfizer vaccine going to be available. People are asking which vaccine, Pfizer or Moderna, Pfizer or Oxford, Pfizer or AstraZeneca. They want to know where the Pfizer vaccine is made. So, like, what would be interesting here is to follow these queries and see the kind of results that people are coming back to with those questions, because they're asking the same question over, but just comparing it to a different vaccine. So this one takes you to a WHO website. So, okay, that's a good, credible website. Pfizer versus Oxford. That takes you health.gov.au and ABC and BBC. So those are pretty good sites. And the conversation is often got scientists writing the content. So that's good as well. I mean, what you want to make sure is that there's not really weird misinformation popping up here. Pfizer or AstraZeneca. Sorry, we did that one. Which vaccine? Pfizer. Why is the Pfizer vaccine so cold? People are asking that as well. They want to understand, like, what happens to the RNA. And that would be something that's really interesting to unpack as well, but I don't think we have time on this webinar. But, you know, what actually happens once it defrosts and those fragments do fall apart? Like, what happens then? If that's injected, like, I guess people might be curious about that. Is Pfizer vaccine mRNA? So they're trying to understand what that is. And so there's the conversation again has another article published about mRNA vaccines and why they're a breakthrough and why they're supposed to be cold. And this guy is a scientist from the Vanderbilt University Medical Center. So that's, you know, that's good content. But I think, you know, probably Pfizer would be very interested to know that this is where people who are asking questions about their vaccine are being directed. So if you see the hangover one here again, we can definitely follow that down. How much does the vaccine cost? People are asking that as well. Can you drink alcohol? This is Australia. Yeah, we always want to know that. Can I drink alcohol after having the vaccine? And do I need to avoid getting pregnant? People are, it's been recommended here from healthline.com, which is not an Australian site, but they're saying recommended that you don't binge drink or use heavy alcohol around the time of getting the vaccine. So that's, probably good advice. Just having a look here, Pfizer vaccine and autoimmune disorders. So you start to see different subsegments of people exploring. So you see a lot of questions around pregnancy, which we anticipate. And then you see other subsets of patients wondering which vaccine is good for them. So if you were going to do that vaccine comparator chart, it would probably be a good idea to include, a recommendation for different subsets of patients as well. So people who already have autoimmune diseases. So the top search result to this is creakyjoints.org, living with arthritis. So that again, and then ultimately here you've got the CDC. So that's a well-respected kind of direction, but Pfizer themselves are not present in terms of answering these questions. And this is what I guess is my philosophy about how to use search listening is it gives us an opportunity as an industry to turn up with that patient responsive content and make sure that we're publishing disease education or context around the therapies and diseases that we have that answer the questions that patients have. And that in my mind is very different to direct to patient advertising. It's about answering the questions that they have because we know that they're going online and they're asking these questions. This is proof. And we can even see where they're going. And that's what is so fascinating. So we have a responsibility really to make sure, first of all, that we displace the bloggers and the clickbait and the people crowing from the mountaintop with their N of 1 experience and providing evidence-based context back to them. Pfizer vaccine versus Sputnik V, Sputnik 5. Okay. Interesting. Bloomberg turns up there. So is there anything here that people want to explore in terms of answers to those questions, or shall we pop onto having a look at the AstraZeneca vaccine and the questions people are asking around that? Let's have a little peek. Yeah, this is, I mean, you can see there's a huge amount of search activity around the AstraZeneca vaccine specifically. I mean, Australia as a whole is just so engaged in this. It's not just healthcare professionals. I mean, it's very rare that I see this many questions around one product. Will the AstraZeneca vaccine work on the new strain? So that indicates that as people are starting to decide which one they're going to take, if they're in that fortunate position to be able to choose, they want to know about, people are worried about these new strains and they want to know that it's going to be effective against them. So the top results on this one are news stories. So that's, that's interesting. There's a good reassurance here that Australians can still have faith in the COVID-19 vaccines. That's come out from the ABC. Then there's this Oxford AstraZeneca's jab fails to prevent mild and moderate, let's have a look at this, COVID from the South African strain, study shows. And this is from the Financial Times. So this is interesting because this is like page 1 Google results. Someone's going to come here, and AstraZeneca probably needs to know and understand that this has been published by, you know, a financial newspaper, and that's the top result. And it could undermine people's confidence in their vaccine, you know, saying that it does not appear to offer protection against mild and moderate disease caused by the viral variant first identified in South Africa. So where's the reference? What study? Does not appear. You know, I think that kind of stuff to me sets off all kinds of alarm bells, but to the average person, they're going to take away that as black and white, and they're going to be like, oh, okay, well then that's, you know, maybe I don't want that one. They might start talking to their friends as well, because this is the other thing about search listening, is that we know that this is happening upstream. This is where people go first. They ask their questions, they find content, and then they copy and paste that into Twitter, where we've got, I think it's about 4 million Australians, and then we've got Facebook, which is about 11 million Australians. So these then feed into those social streams and those conversations, and that's where you get the amplification of misinformation, and we kind of get all kinds of interesting impacts on the public narrative around these influence behavior as well. So someone's asking why the AstraZeneca vaccine is better. That's pretty commonly asked as well. And when will the AstraZeneca vaccine be ready? Again, people in Australia are on the edge of their seats waiting for these vaccines to roll out. Just reading. Everyone's asking, can you drink alcohol? I love it. The Pfizer vaccine, can you drink alcohol? And then they go and check, well, with the AstraZeneca vaccine, can you drink alcohol? Everybody wants to know. They want to know, can I take ibuprofen? And I would imagine that these questions around ibuprofen and paracetamol are to do with that hangover effect that we talked about earlier, those flu-like symptoms that people are getting, and they're like, are these real? I'm feeling that they're real. But I know this isn't COVID. This is a response to the vaccine. So can I take ibuprofen? Can I take paracetamol? Which one of these is going to be better in terms of not impact the work that the vaccine needs to do, activating my immune system? So that's really interesting. People as well, this is again another subsegment of patients, is AstraZeneca vaccine with allergies. So we've seen in the news conversations about people who have allergies to potentially consider around the Pfizer vaccine, and here, so people are then diving in and asking, well, with the vaccine, the AstraZeneca one, can people with allergies safely take it? And this first one is anaphylaxis.org.uk, saying that the AstraZeneca vaccine does not contain PEG and is a suitable alternative. It's also saying here that that's an excipient in the Moderna vaccine. So, you know, if you're allergic to the Pfizer one, then you probably might want to consider not taking the Moderna one. So that's a quite interesting discovery. So we're starting to see and be able to create these subsegments of people that are looking for information. So people with autoimmune diseases, people with allergies, people who are pregnant. And then we've got versus. So this is where people are asking versus Novavax, you know, versus Johnson & Johnson, versus Pfizer, versus Moderna. So people are really looking at that. And that's where something that does consolidate all of the data onto one table would be definitely very, very valuable to people. So it's surprising the farmers that have developed, so there's just a comment here, it is surprising that the pharmaceutical companies that have developed these vaccines are not on page 1. How can pharma companies get their message across? This is the thing that surprises me all the time. And that's why I get so excited about search listening. And the reason why these these companies are not turning up on page one is because we're not listening to the questions. And if we're not listening to the long form questions, then we're not able to turn up in response to those questions. And so what happens is organically, the search engines will generate results to those questions that are based on something that fits that question most closely. So it could be a news article from a newspaper in India, or it could be a blog. And this is why I feel excited about search listening, but also and intimidated by the amount of work that we need to do to be able to turn up in the right place, because it isn't just about that one person answering, having a question answered. It's what they do with that answer. And it's that behavior that we all have, that we rarely go past page one on a Google search result. We're like, oh yeah, that'll do as an answer to my question. We click on what seems to be the most quickest way to scratch that itch and then move on. And that's where being present on page one is really important. And knowing what the questions are and speaking in the way that humans ask questions of search engines is the best way to turn up in response to those questions. So just using keyword search engine optimization is not enough, as we can see here. And that's why I'm kind of a bit evangelical even about search listening. Let's go into which one do you want to go and have a look at? Should we look at Novavax? Bye, no worries. Yes, you can. You can listen to the end tomorrow. Yeah, so people are wondering who's ordered the Novavax vaccine. What I think is sweet here is who makes the Novavax vaccine. My understanding is that, it's the company, but because people don't know that Novavax is a company, because it's an emerging player in the sense of into the public realm. The pharma industry knows of Novavax, especially in the vaccine space, but the general public, this is the first time that this company is coming onto the radar, and that's why a lot of people are asking who makes the Novavax vaccine without realizing, of course, that it's Novavax. So I thought maybe now what we can do is just any questions that you have. If there's anything you want to kind of particularly explore, feel free to pop those up. Or if that's kind of enough for now, that because we can keep diving into this all day. It's pretty fantastic and very, very rich, and it's a great way to start to kind of consolidate what what the key themes are, what the top results are that are coming up, the players that, like the conversation seems to turn up a lot, Wikipedia turns up a lot. Yes, the hair loss question. So I'm trying to remember what I asked when I discovered that one. I think it was COVID vaccine. We didn't go into that yet. What we can do as well, and this is something that yeah, there we go. It comes up like so weird. Just COVID vaccine. Clicked on the wrong one. Sorry. Whiteboard dyslexia, I call it. I think what's probably happened is that there must have been some conversation about coronavirus causing hair loss, and maybe people are worried that if you get the vaccine and it's giving you like a mimicking kind of experience, does that mean that you also will get the hair loss? So I did definitely see that question the other day, but in the interest of time, I won't try and comb through all of the live questions to find it again. But popping it in is another great way to kind of see what the results are. And sometimes what I do as well here is I toggle between Google and Bing to see the kind of results that are coming up. And it can be interesting as well to go to videos and things like that to see who are the content creators and how many followers do they have who are talking about these topics. In this particular instance, contemporaryobgyn.net is coming up around will the vaccine cause male pattern hair growth, which is interesting because that's more about hair growth. So definitely the patient information experience a lot of the time when people are asking these questions is really woeful. They're not getting the answers that they want. Like this is actually like completely the opposite. It's giving them an answer about hair growth as opposed to hair loss. And I see that a lot as well. And it did come back in my survey that I undertook last year where people say that their experience of searching for health information online often ends up with more questions than answers and end up feeling more confused than they did when they started looking online for answers. So definitely there's no risk of healthcare professionals going out of business anytime soon or being replaced by Dr. Google, because there's definitely like a massive mess of information being served back to these long form questions that people are asking. Yeah, so that's the other thing. I'll just try, just out of interest. Oh, wow. See, you get videos and that's where you start to uncover this stuff. Yeah, they're talking about the disease. So the hair loss being associated with COVID. And I guess that's where people who might have been close to someone who experienced that hair loss are now concerned that maybe the vaccine might cause that as well. So it's an interesting question, and it's a great way to make sure that if you know people are asking that question, be ready to respond and reassure them. Just having a quick look here in case there's anything else. Another thing that popped out that I thought was really interesting, and I'll see if I can bring it up here, but if not, well, I can definitely talk to it. People were asking if they can get the coronavirus vaccine without parental consent. So that to me shows another segment of the population that are asking about the vaccine. And this is children of anti-vaxxer parents potentially. So children who might be under the age of normal medical consent and normally have to go to see their doctor with a parent, they're asking search engines, how can I get the vaccine without parental consent? So that is a really telling kind of an interesting insight as well that we can glean from the questions being asked into the search engines. Have I seen anything worrying that encourages vaccine hesitancy or refusal? I might take that one and explore that a little bit further offline, and then we can kind of we can kind of loop back on that, because I haven't seen anything massive in terms of questions. I guess what people are coming in and doing here is they're asking questions and they're looking for reassurance or validation. So I guess where you do think about hesitancy, it's the questions that they're asking. Is it going to, can I take it if I'm pregnant? Can I take it if I have an autoimmune disease? Can I take it if I'm anaphylactic? Will it cause hair loss? Those kind of questions to me indicate that there is hesitancy. Is it going to work against all of the different variants? So there's different levels of people just looking to be reassured and looking for guidance around whether or not, whether or not they're going to take it, or whether or not which vaccine is right for them. So cool. So I might wrap it up there in terms of the, the scraping, unless there's anything else that people wanted me to kind of take a quick look at in the last, we've got 10 minutes left if you want to use it, but otherwise I'm happy to wrap up if people feel that they've seen enough. It's definitely something I could spend all day going down these different, rabbit holes. COVID vaccine versus natural immunity, COVID vaccine versus other vaccines, COVID vaccine versus antibodies. There's a lot of people trying to understand this as well. They do want to understand how the COVID vaccine is different to traditional vaccines, and that plays into that, the use of mRNA. And what does this mean? So people who were comfortable with traditional vaccines might actually have vaccine hesitancy around the new type of vaccine. And just maybe be happy in a way that Australia's on this journey a little bit behind other countries, because we want to make sure that if there's another shoe to drop, then we're not necessarily on the front line, and we don't have that urgency right now because we don't have massive outbreaks. So we're in a very fortunate position. Cool. So I think that wraps us up. I'm really, really pleased that you could join me today. It was definitely a fun exploration. I think we've seen some really interesting things in terms of those segments, in terms of the search results that are coming up. It's like what you pointed out, like the major pharma companies that are behind these vaccines and not turning up to answer the questions that people are asking the search engines about their manufactured vaccines. And I think that's a really interesting thing. And it's not even like, in most cases, you're not even seeing government published health information either. And what that all comes back to is the fact that we're not listening to the long form search queries. So we don't have a hope in hell of turning up in response to them because we don't know what those questions are. And again, every day we'll see 10% to 15% shift of new questions. And I actually did compare and contrast a vaccine search query that I had done on the 12th and then on the 14th and then today, and you can actually see the new questions that people are putting in. So Melbourne went into the snap lockdown after I had run the first report, and then you could see Melbourne vaccine, where to get, you could see that pop up. So people are immediately like, well, we're in lockdown. The best way to get out of these, lockdowns is to just get vaccinated. So when's the Melbourne vaccine going to be rolled out? So you definitely can read, the new themes coming through by doing a compare and contrast on the search report as well. So cool. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. And feel free to touch base with me if you have any other questions that you want to ask offline, or if you want to do another deep dive, or you have colleagues that are interested in this as well. Happy to do it. Okay, thanks. Bye.